great to be with you. So Tyler spoke.
Yeah.
That's my son. He sat in a class like this, helped me with Boom Startup, saw the need for more software engineers, and co-founded Dev Mountain. 3 years later, he sold it for $20 million. And then he said, Dad, how old were you when you made your first million? And he beat me by 4 years. So he thinks he's cool. Okay. So hopefully he did a good job in speaking to you. It's so great to be with you here. Steve Little, Dr. Little, he is literally one of the nicest people I've ever met on planet Earth. So if you've had a chance to talk to him, just an incredible individual. So a great friend. Okay, here we go. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to, I'm going to get a little street cred, just a little bit, so you think I know what I'm talking about. Okay? And then I'm going to tell you about Startup Ignition, because it's right in line with the topic for today, which is tech entrepreneurship. This is the last class of the semester for this lecture series, correct? And so hopefully some of you are going to leave here and become tech entrepreneurs. I will tell you that I taught here for 12 years. I never taught an entrepreneurship class where 5 years later there weren't at least about 4 out of 36 on average that became millionaires or multimillionaires from what they learned here at this university by starting a tech entrepreneurship venture. You think that's an exaggeration? It's not. I've tracked it all. Steve sees results of tracking all the time still, that I've tracked all that. So who volunteers to be the 4? Okay. Let's see what happens. And there's more than 36 in here, so probably about 8 to 12 if you really do it. So we're going to talk about that. Tech entrepreneurship. Here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover an overview of it. We're going to talk a little bit more about Startup Ignition just because the process we do. Then we're going to talk about Lean Startup and then founding teams so that you can leave here thinking about how the heck do I really do this? So with that, I'm going to close by saying, how do you find one maybe? Give a hint. I don't have any secret magic bullet. Nobody does. Okay, with that, street cred. Here's a little bit about me. First of all, this is my family. This is my immediate family, my adult children, their spouses, and the grandchildren. I'm just like you. I'm an average, normal person with a family. I have happy times, sad times. I have problems. I have good times. I have incredible, great things happen, and incredibly sad things happen. One of the worst years of my life this last year because my mother died. My summer was horrendous. I've never felt such sadness because it's your mom. She died. And I was right there. I was so sad. I don't know how to explain it. So sad times, happy times. But then there's this, 7 grandkids. That's the best of life. So I remember Steve talking, did you beat me with a grandchild?
Yeah, but you've now got twice as many.
Yeah, you beat me. And he used to brag. I said, man, why are you talking about your grandkids so much? Now that's all I talk about because it's truly the best part of life. All the love with none of the work and the pain. So it's fun. Okay. With that, here's my background. So I'm an entrepreneur. I was at BYU from 80 to 85. In 84, one of the biggest things happened in American business history, and that is the biggest, most powerful company at the time, American Telephone and Telegraph, the company that Alexander Graham Bell started, had become so powerful that it had to be broken up and split into smaller parts by the federal government. It was a monopoly. That was the old AT&T. It's not the AT&T you know today. That is just a brand name that landed on one of the 8 companies that it was broken into, Southwestern Bell. They bought the name AT&T back, and then AT&T is now Southwestern Bell, one of the 8 pieces that the big Mama Bell was broken into, okay? And so this was a powerful monopoly, and in 84 it got broken up. And so I was going to go into medicine when I decided that being a doctor is not what I wanted to do. And I did that because I actually followed a doctor and said, that's a terrible lifestyle. I don't want that, so I'm not going to do that. So I became an entrepreneur. And I went in and competed against this broken up phone company in their most unregulated but most profitable piece, and that was Yellow Pages. The Yellow Pages was lucrative, a license to steal. 50% net profits. And so I competed in the paper print industry at 25% net profits for an independent competitor against the phone company. And over about a 10 to 12 year period, grew to a medium-sized company that expanded from Seattle to Portland, and it was very successful. And then I sold it. because a lot of capital was coming into that industry. People liked what people were doing against the phone companies, and so I sold it because I had discovered something that only academics and scientists and others were usually paying attention to. It was this thing called the internet. And in '94, I discovered the internet and realized that it was going to wipe out Yellow Pages. So I launched in '95, January '95, the first ever internet Yellow Pages. And then that was just for my print company going online. And about 9 months later, I launched Internet Yellow Pages, where all of the independent publishers could join forces and put an Internet Yellow Pages up. And I got 40 different publishers to sign up. And then Microsoft and about 8 other companies wanted to buy me. But right as I was about to sell to Microsoft, 3 people left that company and said, don't do it with Microsoft, let's do it together just as entrepreneurs and go big ourselves. And so 3 Microsoft guys left Microsoft. I joined up with them, merged into them, and that was a company called InfoSpace. 2 years later, we were public on the NASDAQ with 1,500 employees. So there still exists today. It's called Blue Cora. And anyway, that's some entrepreneurship history on me. Now, after that, I became an angel investor, and I've done 85 direct angel investments. I do about 3 to 6 a year, and I invest in startups, and I have about 25 current investments right now that I'm watching and babysitting, and those are some of the companies I've done and invested in and looked at, and obviously I put the good ones up there, because there's a lot of losers, isn't there, Steve? Yeah. So in angel investing, you invest in 10, and 1 or 2 make it. And that's how it goes. So be careful. If you ever invest in startups, do not put all your money into one startup unless it's your own startup. Okay? All right. Now, with that said, I then became an educator. I retired in 2001 from InfoSpace, and 6 months into retirement, BYU called up and said, how would you like to be a professor of entrepreneurship? And I go, I'm not a PhD. Oh, we think you'd be a good teacher. Even you don't have to be a PhD. I go, you don't? I didn't even know that. And you could be a professional faculty member, and that's what happened. So I moved down here, and that's when I met Steve, and we became friends and have been friends ever since. And I've taught hundreds and hundreds of classes and lectures and did a lot here at BYU, I think. I hope I did okay, Steve. I was trained at Babson College before coming to BYU. Babson's the #1 school in entrepreneurship. BYU's #3 right now. Babson's been like #1 for 20 years in a row. BYU, you got to knock them off their pedestal. It's going to be hard, isn't it? So then I also am a mentor. So I founded Boom Startup, a tech accelerator, which again I sold in 2013 when I went to Google. I also just met with them yesterday because Boom Startup was sold this last summer to Assure Equity. I don't know if you know about Assure Equity and Jeremy Nielsen's company. They are the back office to basically most of the crowdfunding industry in the world now. It's pretty amazing. Up out of Salt Lake City, and they bought Boom Startup. So anyway, that's kind of fun, and literally thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs I've helped. It's really a great, fun legacy in life, and I get about 1 to 3 emails a week from people I've mentored before that update me, and they tell me all these incredible things that happened to them. It's pretty amazing. And I share some of those with Steve. All of that culminated when I left Google after just 2 years of bringing Google Fiber, which in the first year we got 90% market share. That was pretty good. And then Google Fiber, I was done with that, and instead of coming back to university, I started Startup Ignition, which is basically like its own little mini university for entrepreneurship. And it's a boot camp. Kind of like Dev Mountain is a dev boot camp. In very quick time, you can learn how to be a software engineer, and the skills of entrepreneurship are taught here. So that is me. So one thing that some people like to know, what the heck happened? You had a company go public. So I'm going to get you a little excited for a second and show you what happened to me. So this is my initial public offering. So this is literally where I went on a road show as senior vice president. Another guy was the CEO. Went out and went through the whole process. And it was crazy. By the way, some really weird people in this world, mostly from New York City, that put money ahead of everything in life, and I met those kind of people, met some nice people. It was really interesting. So the stock went public on December 15th, 1998. What do you, and it went at $15. Sitting there in the morning and the first tick comes by and it's $15. So what do you think I paid for those shares? How much do you think I paid for those shares? I had shares, right? Don't you think, if I'm a founder? So I paid about 5/100ths of a penny. So if you wonder why would anybody take the risk of starting their own company instead of going and getting a good job and working for another entrepreneur who exploits that time and makes way more money on that time than you make yourself by renting it to him? Sorry, that's a long way of saying working for the man. Okay, why would you do that? It's probably, this is a big motivator, right? So then the first day it closed at $20. So it was open for, what's the stock market open for? About 6.5, 7 hours. So in 6.5, 7 hours, all my holdings in that company went up by 33% in one day from a massive other percentage calculation from the original investment. So you go, what the heck? This is a pretty good deal. And it is. And so then, in the craziest stock time in American history, way crazier than today's crazy, we had a 2-for-1 split on $5,499. That means the stock went down in half in price, but the number of shares I held doubled. And then it split again on January 5th, 2000, and then it split again on April 6th, 2000. At the height, on March 3rd of 2000, was the highest price, $130.50. Adjusted for splits, that's $1,108, which is over a 7,000% increase. This is nuts. It's nuts. But because of that, I'm here and I met Steve Little. It was all about meeting Steve Little. So had the freedom to do things. This kind of wealth, when you get it, there's a great mentor that Steve and I know named Steve Gibson, who came before me here at BYU. And he teaches about the second half of life. When something like this happens to you, you say, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And hopefully do good and help people. And that's what I've been trying to do. And I tried to do it through BYU. And I'm trying to do it now by helping others and trying to do the best I can with it. So this is a really interesting thing. So the question is now, with this in mind, would you like to know how it's done? How do you really do that? Okay, so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. First of all, you have to have a business model that works. Okay? If you don't have a business model that works, at the end of the day, you won't get to the checkered flag finish line. That's important to understand. So, you have to have a good business model. 1 year and 9 months ago, there was an entrepreneur I met because of a former student at BYU who was his number 2 guy. And he said, my number 1 guy doesn't know what he's doing, he needs help. And so we went to breakfast at Maggleby's Fresh on University Avenue, and I met him, and nobody else would give him a time of day. And then they told me their business model, and I go, that's probably the single best business model I've seen in the last 10 years. That's a huge statement from somebody like me. And I go, I think I'm crazy. So I showed my son Tyler, who you met earlier in the semester, said, I want you to go meet with them and see what you think. I tried not to bias him. And then I got my financial guy who's helped me with over 200 companies who worked and helped PrinterLogic go from 1 million to 35 million down in southern Utah, and had him meet with this company. And they both met with him, and Tyler goes, that's the best thing I've ever seen. And my financial guy quit PrinterLogic and joined that company. That was 1 year and 9 months ago. My son Tyler and I each invested and were part of a little bit of money. The first round in that company at a $3 million valuation on the company. They're about to raise $25 million at a $150 million valuation in 1 year and 9 months. The company's name is Route. They're about 100 employees already. It's crazy. So, when you look at this, you have to have a business model. Now, when we look at this, and look at, this is time and money going out to the right, maybe, and maybe more time going out to the right. So, there's different stages of ventures. So, a tech venture will have an idea. You'll have to be able to validate your business model. Then you're going to get some traction, some early customers and users. And then you're going to build infrastructure to prepare yourself for scaling. If you do any of these steps out of order, you will fail. The world tries to get you to do them out of order because they don't know what they're doing and they tell you to do it out of order. The thing called lean startup is the process of doing the right things in the right order. Now, there's huge risk at the early stage of a venture. This risk right here is massive. And then it starts dropping off. So what do we do to de-risk a venture? Well, first of all, we get revenue. Well, because revenue starts de-risking a venture. You can see that those are inverse curves. Now, the investment or capital we need to help get to revenue and build a company follows revenue generation. Well, that's an interesting problem. So I need capital to get to revenue, but I don't have any revenue to justify capital. So we have to overcome that little problem. And so the question is, how do we do this? Well, we first do what's called hypothetical validation. We ask customers what they would do with our business model. Will they support it and act on it? We ask them if they will. That's called hypothetical validation. And we do that through interviews, surveys, and focus groups. Dr. Gary Rhodes, who just retired in December from the Marriott School, developed a test called the Wow Factor test. And it's a very good predictor on whether or not your idea actually has the potential to find product market fit. This is an important thing. We need to be able to find product market fit. Product market fit means you validated a business model and the way that you create, capture, and deliver value in the marketplace will actually work. So if you want to know if your idea has the potential to get to product market fit, you do a wow factor test. And it's an amazingly accurate predictor. It's so accurate that I backtracked and looked at so many deals, it's very accurate. The problem is when you get a low wow factor score that tells you you should abandon the idea and your idea sucks, most entrepreneurs are so in love with their idea they won't abandon it. And then they spend the next year or two working on something that was predicted to fail. This is called entrepreneurial science. Entrepreneurship is not a whimsical activity, it's very scientific based. And this score is very accurate. So it's a 1 to 10 scale, and you want to get a 7.5 or higher. If you do that, then you go on to what's called actual validation, where you're observing what customers do, not just what they say. Okay? And so we're going to observe customers, and we're going to do rapid assumption tests and get to a minimum viable product that will help us observe what customers do with our business model. And once we do that and feel good about where we're at, we have nailed a business model. If the minimum viable product proves that customers like and will act the way we expect and want in our business model, then we have actual product market fit. This is a crowning moment in the history of your entrepreneurial journey. Because when you have this, then people go to breakfast with you at Maggleby's, think you've got something cool, and they give you money, and all your dreams come true. If you try to go get money and meet with people, and you'd have a business model, only stupid people will give you money, and you'll still fail. But smart people won't give you money, and you won't get money, and you won't have any money to build what you need to build. This is not rocket science. Pretty easy formula, isn't it? Okay? But I'm here to tell you that within a 10-mile radius of where we're sitting, less than 20% of the entrepreneurs are doing this. They're doing it the opposite. It's crazy. Crazy. Okay, so with this, then we start having customers and users a small little tiny amount maybe, we're starting to get some traction, then what's interesting, we've got to measure where those customers and users are coming from so that we can also run another test called the WOM-PROM test. If you want to look that up on your tab right now, because I'm not going to talk about it anymore, it's a really interesting look. In Google, you can look up David Benetti on a Medium article about WOM-PROM. That's WOM-PROM. That is, what is the ratio of your word-of-mouth customer acquisition versus your promotional marketing customer acquisition? How many customers are you getting free versus those that you have to pay to acquire? The ratio of WOM and PROM and the balance is extremely important. All the research shows that the optimal balance is 40% WOM, 60% PROM. Because when you're at 40% WOM and PROM, then you can have a hockey stick growth curve. If you have 10% WOM or 0% WOM or 80% WOM, you will not have a hockey stick growth curve, you'll have a crappy growth curve. So that means then when you pour more money into marketing and customer acquisition, you will just move a crappy curve earlier. You won't get the hockey stick curve, so you won't have the kind of growth that leads to the kind of outcomes I was saying if you would like to know how to do. Okay? So this is important. So we would not, at this stage of having just a few customers without enough data to see what our WOM-PROM score is, go raise money and press on the accelerator, because then all we're doing is pouring money into an inefficient engine. It's like putting gas into an engine that gets 5 horsepower. Try going to Florida on that. Okay? Not good. So we got to tweak our engine and get it up to 400 horsepower or 300 or whatever. Okay? Now, I'm way out of my area of expertise now. Okay, on horsepower. So with that, looking at this, we're doing that. Now, once we have it at 40%, that is called go-to-market fit. We have to have go-to-market fit before we press on the accelerator. If you press on the accelerator with raising capital and betting the farm and telling everybody you figured it out when you haven't figured it out, you're going to just get money from maybe some smart investors, but probably more dumb investors, and you're going to lose their money and fail, and then everybody's going to think you're a loser. Being branded a loser in the venture ecosystem is not fun. People lose for lots of reasons, but you want to make sure that you're being smarter and stopping before you've wasted too much money. There are companies out there that raise tens of millions of dollars, and you think they look really cool, and they fail. Like the one I just told you about. If he doesn't execute well, he can still fail, right? Okay? But it's not going to be a business model problem. It'll be an execution problem, because that's what we're into when we're looking at WOM-PROM. So with that, we look at this. The next thing then is we've got to build infrastructure. Before you start taking on a bunch of customers and users, for users, if you're web-based, mobile-based, and you have servers and running on AWS, is everything ready? Is your software written to handle a massive amount of users? Do you have the sales process down so a non-founder can sell it, or does it have to be a founder? How are you going to grow a company if you can't get non-founder salesmen to sell? What about customer service and onboarding activation? How are you going to onboard and get a customer starting to use your product? How are you going to keep them happy with customer service? How are you going to retain them if they want to cancel and leave you? How do you keep them? All these systems, selling, activation, customer service, retention, have to be figured out and built up so that you can take the onslaught of customers and users that will come. If not, it'll be havoc and you'll fail. So this is kind of the process how I do it. Now, let's talk about funding. How do we get people to fund us? Well, first of all, who's going to fund us at this crazy, risky time? Do you think you're going, I'm going to put all three up here. Do you think you're going to go to an institutional investor or a seed fund, a venture capitalist, and say, hey, venture capitalist, I know you just care about making money. You don't care about anything else, because that's your duty, is to make money for your investors. So I still want you to invest in me when it's really high risk up here and you're probably going to lose your money. How many times do you think you're going to convince them to do that? Okay, not very much. So who invests here? Well, the entrepreneur invests a little himself. The good news is all the way up to here, you don't have to spend hardly any money. If you're spending money through this process, you're stupid. Okay? You don't have to. Now, when you need some money maybe to build out a real MVP and get the first 5 customers or first 100 users or something, and you need money, the only ones that are going to invest at this high risk is going to be people that trust you. They know you, and they say, okay, you're kind of smart, you figured some things out, I'm going to give you some money. And that's why they call it friends and family money. Okay? They also call it friends, family, and fools money, because sometimes fools will give you money too. The biggest fools, the easiest fools to get money from are doctors and dentists. That's a tip of the day, okay? All right, so with that, the next people that invest is when you get to this stage that I talked about, and you can see the curve really going down, is there's actually investors with domain expertise or synergy that don't put money first all the way. They sometimes are interested in a venture. For instance, corporate venture says, I'll invest in this startup because I want to protect my main product. So I mentored, and as an alumnus of Startup Ignition, the founders of Pura. Have you heard of Pura here locally? Pura got a $500,000 no-recourse investment from a multi-billion-dollar company because they were doing an IoT product disrupting the fragrance industry. So the largest fragrance company in the world gave them $500,000 and said, we really don't care if you pay us back, we just want to watch what you're doing. And they took the $500,000 happily. And was very non-dilutive and not recourse like regular debt. That's a great deal. Okay? Angels, grants from the government. The National Science Foundation does a lot of grants. Okay? Family offices, rich families that act like venture investors, but they sometimes just like things. They sometimes are doing things that they're familiar with, and they'll invest in you because you're doing something familiar with them. And so they're a little easier to get money from than these guys, and they'll invest as they see proof happening here. Now, when you get to here and you've built out your infrastructure, and the number one way that these people know that you've built out infrastructure is that you go 6 months in a row with your revenue increasing more than 10% month over month. 6 months in a row. When that happens, these people will think you're the pretty girl at the dance, and you're going to get asked to the prom. And that's what's going to happen. And these people will be all over you like that. And then they'll give you growth capital, and then it's to the moon, Alice. That's an old reference they're not going to get. Okay? So with that, that's basically an overview of how it's done. Does that make sense? Is it that hard? Well, I'm going to tell you what's hard. It's hard to do all this stuff because it's so doggone unsexy. Asking customers what they'll do, watching what they do, changing your business model because they tell you you're stupid is not fun activity. It's way more fun to go rent an office, to buy a bunch of computers, hire people with Uncle Harry's $100,000, and do that for a year until you lose it all and fire everybody and go back and get your MBA. Okay? That's what seems fun. And that happens all the time. We don't want that to happen. We want success. Yeah?
So, if at any point you are not hitting the metrics, like the one pound, does it mean that you have to jump boat, or does it mean
No.
you have to adjust your model?
Well, if you were at WOM Prom, you would definitely have to adjust something here, and you couldn't get it to 40. Okay? That means you've got to tweak your product, put some viral loops in it, and get more free users or free customers from your paid users and paid customers. Does that make sense? If I spend money on direct sales force or marketing to get customers, I need to get some customers from not paying for them. I need one customer to tell another customer how good my product is and want it because of that. Does that make sense? If I don't get that, the curve won't be good enough to get me to where these people will be excited, and you'll get a great exit and opportunity with this company. Does that make sense?
How do you decide if you just have to tweak something versus this is not going to work, I have to
You should discover things aren't going to work out way back here. This is one, I call these red-lined blue boxes gates. This gate, when you get over 7.5, let me tell you, I have a guy right now with a company called Rootopia. It's really cool. I didn't really like the idea because it didn't work It wasn't something I would do, I didn't think. But then I started listening. I go, man, maybe I would use that. He goes and does a wow factor test and gets an 8.3, which, by the way, over 8 is incredible. My daughter and her new partner just did one, got a 9.2, the highest ever tested by Gary Rhodes or myself or Eric Espinoza, who's got a company to do wow factor testing. So the highest ever, 9.2. And she's launched it now, and they're having some success. It's incredible. My own daughter, who knew that? So I didn't get that either because it has to do with dancing, so I didn't understand it. Okay, so that's interesting. And then this is another gate. Are you getting any customers or users? Okay, right here. And then do you have 40%? So these are gates. So right here, you should never go, if you're going in here, these rapid assumption tests, some invalid product will quickly tell you that your idea stinks and you're not doing a good job. But this will tell you, this will eliminate 90% of the failure that you'll have. Just don't launch a company with a dumb idea. But can I tell you, most ideas are dumb as far as becoming businesses. A cool idea that sounds cool as an idea might not make a good business, and that has to be looked at. So, all right, with that, let's keep going. So the startup initiative model, what do I do to figure this out? Well, startups need to do the things they're doing in the right order. If you do something out of sequence, that's called premature scaling. If we do scaling activity before we've figured out our business model, that's 74% of all failure backtracks to that one act. So when we look at the 6 stages of a business, discovery, validation, efficiency, scale, sustain, and renewal, the life cycle of a business, these 2 are really important. So Startup Ignition is a boot camp to make sure you do these 2 right. The good news is it doesn't cost you any money to do those 2 steps. It costs you logic, time, and effort. Okay? So we need to discover who the customer is and what problem they have, and that they really have it and will pay to have it fixed. And then we have to validate a business model that we have devised to create the value, capture the value, and deliver the value to the customer. We have to do those things, and then we build efficiency by building infrastructure, and then we can scale. Most entrepreneurs want to jump right here and just start scaling. A scaling activity is renting an office, buying computers, writing software code. Before you know, you've nailed a model. There's many, many minimum viable products that can be what we call paper MVPs that don't need real code written to test software. You can do many things with 3D printed models to test consumer products that don't need you to go make molds and do a production run. Okay? Now, with that said, this is not hard. In a nutshell, you have an idea. You make sure you make it the best idea possible. Sometimes your ideas stink in 3 minutes. By the way, do you know that if you guys brought me 100 ideas, probably 95 of them within 2 minutes, I would tell you are terrible. And Steve's been with me. See me do it. I do it all the time. I've had cases here at BYU where a professor walks in, spent $30,000 of money, said, hey, I hear you know about entrepreneurship. Yeah, I teach it here. What do you teach? Physical therapy. Oh, okay. What did you develop? Oh, I invented a device for physical therapy. Oh, great. Tell me about it. And he pulls out his prototype, spent $30,000 and a year of his life on. I go look on the internet. I see a lot of these. I see patents on them. Took me like 30 seconds. I flip my computer around and go, this patent looks exactly like what you got there. And he goes, I paid $5,000 or $10,000 to an attorney. He said, nobody had a patent. Like, he looks at it. He gets all red-faced. He goes, I'll be back to you in 3 days. I don't hear from him for 3 weeks. And he finally calls him back and goes, yeah, it's been patented. I'm dead. It was a waste of my time and money. So, happens all the time. Okay. I have a detailed system for testing ideas, even before the wow factor test. We use Nathan Furr and Paul Alstrom's big idea canvas as well. Then we say, okay, this is the one idea I want to pursue. Then we do a wow factor test, which I told you about. We make sure we follow that and we get a high enough score. Then we say, oh, maybe we should found a company now. Now we might be ready to look at who's going to be the founders and start a company. We make sure you don't mess up. By the way, 90% of all litigation in the business world is one founder suing another founder. Steve, I don't want to embarrass BYU in any way, but raise your hand if you've ever seen great potential BYU startups have legal problems founder to founder. Have you been annoyed by having to help fix those problems? Okay. We don't want to talk about it more than that in this class. Okay. All right. So then we do full lean startup, which is a doctrine you're being taught at BYU very well, hopefully. And that's what we also teach in Startup Ignition and take you through all the processes, and that's what we do. Okay, so there's been a fusion of entrepreneurship and science. The resources we look at are these books. These are the masterpieces. If you don't have these in your arsenal of library for entrepreneurship, you're missing the masterpieces. The real masterpieces are these ones. I would have the Startup Owner's Manual, Business Model Generation, Running Lean and Scaling Lean. Ash Moore has become a great friend of BYU now, right? And Steve Blanks helped us, and Alex has helped us too. These books are incredible. The cost of these books will save you tens of thousands of dollars of mistakes in the first year of a venture, maybe 100,000 plus. Okay? Now, founding teams. I'm going to talk about in the last, what do I have, 2 minutes? Yeah. 7 minutes. 7 minutes, great. I'll do that. I want to touch now and end on the topic of founding teams. First of all, no lone wolf. Tech entrepreneurship cannot be done with a lone wolf entrepreneur unless it's completely non-scalable, which means it's a lifestyle business, which means you'll never be able to sell it, which means you'll only make a salary and never have an equity day where you get a bunch of money in your bank account and are financially free for the rest of your life. I wouldn't do tech entrepreneurship for lifestyle reasons. I'd do it because I'm going to build a company that will give me freedom and control that I can do great things with. That's what I would do it for. So, lone wolf. There's many, many articles you read. Everybody thinks, Richard Branson was a lone wolf entrepreneur. No, he's not. He says that's a myth. I wasn't a lone wolf entrepreneur. I was just a celebrity front man. Okay, diversity. Diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams. Unfortunately, Utah and BYU are very non-diverse, relatively speaking, to the rest of the world. And so there's a diversity problem sometimes. And a lot of founding teams at BYU are not diverse. 3 accounting students, all aged 19 to 23, white males from Logan, Utah, is a terrible founding team. You don't need clones on a founding team. You need diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of how you grew up, diversity of challenge you on your opinions and your decisions. So that's not just racial, minority, women. It's diversity of a lot of things, and you need diversity. Every research on this shows that diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams. Composition of skills is important. First of all, this is my scale. A team for me is a business co-founder and a technical co-founder, and both are full-time working on the deal. That's my 5-minute warning. Both are working on the deal. So that's ideal. A B team would be you have a business co-founder and technical co-founder, and only one of them is full-time, the other one's part-time. C, lacking one of the co-founder types, or neither is full-time. There's a problem. If you're a business side of the equation and can't find a tech co-founder, your number one ultimate job needs to be validate your business model simultaneously with finding a tech co-founder. You can validate a business model without the tech co-founder because you don't need to start writing software yet. But it'd be nice to have that tech co-founder on board during the validation process. Does that make sense? Okay. Lacking one of the co-founder types or neither full-time C, I wouldn't start with that. That's like saying I'm going to drive a car, 1,000 miles to a destination with 3 tires and the other wheels off. Okay, that's dumb. Okay. Lone wolf. Okay for lifestyle, not for this. Now, worst situation is you actually compromise this even worse. How can you do that? I'll explain it, and then that's a definite failure, okay? So, first of all, Part-time can be worse than none. The problem with a part-time tech co-founder is that if and when that tech co-founder starts writing code and then leaves you 6 weeks or 12 weeks later, you throw away the code and have to start over. That happens all over the place. Within 10 miles of where we're sitting, that scenario has happened hundreds of times in the last 6 months with founding teams. There's so much money wasted on code that gets written and never used or even finished. It's crazy, okay? Now, also, for A and B, full-time after validated business model is perfectly fine. While you're a student, while you've got a job, do your validation work. It'll take you a little longer if you're not full-time, but it's perfectly fine. Now, once you've found a nailed business model, you should focus on that business model, because finding a nailed business model is a very special thing to have. Okay? Now, what makes a good team? Well, the bare minimum, like I said, is a biz guy or gal and a tech guy or gal. A lot of times they say it's the 3 H's with a V, and that is a hipster, a huckster, and a hacker. Okay? So we need to have this to make a rounded team. Now, often we can have one person be 2 of these H's, but not all 3. That's a very, very, very rare person, and probably doesn't exist in this room. Okay? Being a hacker, a hipster, and a hustler all at once, hard. But you can have somebody be a hipster and a hustler. You could have the hustler, sales-oriented person, have some flair with design and understanding users and what they need, okay? That can happen. So, visionary can also be combined in. So you need hipster, huckster, hacker, and visionary. Now, in the coders world, you need a back end, a front end, and a UX UI. These 3 elements for the average tech startup. So it turns out that it's hard to find one person that does all 3 of those things too. If you're going to have a tech co-founder, I strongly urge you to make it a back-end coder, a full-stack developer, not a UX UI person, not a front-end HTML person. That's not enough horsepower in your engine. Sorry. Now, so having 2 tech people, one that's a back-end and one that's really good at HTML and really good at UX UI, and then a business guy, that 3 together, now that's making the hairs on my neck stand up. I'm excited just talking about that illustrative example because it's exciting, okay? So there you go. You see all this stuff in here? All right, so I'm going to go faster. This has a lot to do with the business model, which I don't have time to talk about today, but without the right team, you cannot do the value canvas, which is how do you get your value proposition to your customer and keep good relationships and develop channels beyond the scope of today's lecture, but it's all tied in. If you don't have a complete team, you can't do 4/9 of a business model and you'll be dead. Okay. With that, let me tell you about compromised teams increasing risk of failure. Let's take the hustler, the hacker, or the techie, and the creative person, the UX UI, or the hipster, UX UI, whatever you want to call it. If we compromise from the ideal on any of these people, we exponentially increase the risk of failure. The ideal is that these 3 are all no salary, full-time, and have ownership greater than 10% in the company. If we compromise and the person has to have some salary or even a big salary, or the person can't be full-time, or you're somehow keeping one of these 3 people with like 2% only, that's a deal as an investor I will look at and run away from. Okay? Now, software development. Compromising more on software development. Here's a real email I write people, so let me take you through this real quickly. Principle, the absolute best solution for technology product development is to have a rockstar co-founder coder. Now, you don't call a rockstar co-founder coder a rockstar because they think you're stupid. We business people call them rock stars, but don't call them a rock star because that's a stupid name. They call themselves 10x coders, okay? So better than that, nothing is better than that by a wide margin. Anything else is at best a compromise that threatens success. No joke. On a scale of 1 to 10, here is the relative value. See, this is a typo from a real email. The relative value of each scenario. 10, a rockstar coder, full-time as co-founder, no salary, has 20 to 45% equity. 9, rockstar coder, co-founder, modest salary, has 10 to 35% founder equity. 8, rockstar coder is a key employee, little to no salary, 10 to 20% in stock options. 5, I jump all the way down to 5. I get a US-based $100+ an hour software firm building my product. I have the money to pay them. I negotiated well, full architecture, finished product. Still only a 5. Most of the time, this won't work. 4, part-time coder as employed, contractor, loose association, pay per hour, small options. That'll blow up in your face. Happens all the time. Offshore coders, blows up in your face, lose money. 1, US-based $100+ software firm on contract, can't afford it, do it piecemeal. Okay, anything below an 8 will likely fail. There's a slight chance it can be a stepping stone or intermediate step, but I have lost cumulative over $1 million of my own money. That's a true statement, $1 million of my own money in my entrepreneurial career, stupidly believing I am a special snowflake and can go with the scenario ranked less than an 8 on the scale above and make it. Stupid, stupid, stupid. For this reason, I think a super high priority is for you to literally throw over every rock in the area and find at least a quasi-co-founder, rockstar coder. Even if she wants $10,000 per month and you negotiate them down to $6K and 12% options and it has to be full-time status, you will then be 6 months or a year from now be thriving when any compromise that will cause you to limp or fail. I sincerely believe this. And then I ended by saying this. If you come to me with a compromise solution, I will acquiesce and let you believe you are a special snowflake. Then you need to know that I have only succumbed and I do not believe it. I just don't want to fight you on it. Okay? I know we need to end. So my last thing on finding team members, there are places like Co-Founders Lab, which merged in with FounderDating.com. I've found people here in Utah through that. Okay? You got to turn over every rock. You got to go where they are. You got to entice them away. Convince them you have a business model that will work and show them your validation. Have to be a Pied Piper that people will follow, and you can find this tech co-founder. If you don't believe your deal's good, why should anybody else? You better find a good deal and you better believe it. Now, that's enough. I'll leave it at that. This is what I talked about today. I want to give you one last single tip for life balance before I finish. The last single tip, and that's my closing slide. Matter of fact, do you want to know this? Because Steve wanted me to talk about that. It's my single best tip, and it has to do with 7 to 8 p.m. at night. Okay? And then while you're looking at it, here's my email. Any of you can email me anytime for any advice or questions you have on entrepreneurship. Okay, so the tip is this. About halfway through my career, I found out my wife was not happy on some stuff. We had 4 kids, young kids. I was working 80 hours a week. I would tell her I'd be home for dinner every night. But I'd walk in at 7:30, 8:30, 9:30. Over time, it caused a massive problem. Okay? So, what do we do to fix it? We had a real talk. And I realized a whole art of being a good manager and a good CEO and a good business person is manage expectations. I also need to manage expectations in my family life with my spouse and my children. So, instead of over-promising and under-delivering, which is how you are a goat, I started realizing I needed with my wife to under-promise and over-deliver. So I started managing it. So she told me, the kids are starving by 4 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, I can barely keep them away from food, but we need to have family together, or dinner together as family. So from 5 to 6 is a nightmare. So I said, okay, I will be home, though. Can you agree to 6 o'clock? I'll be home every day by 6 o'clock. And then I made it a cardinal rule. At 5:45, I was walking in. And I did that, and I became a hero to my wife. And from 6 to 8, I was having dinner, getting the kids bathed, playing with them, putting them down to sleep, and by 8:30, I was back at work. So the second tip is, my office was never more than 1.5 miles from where I lived. So if I had to go back to the office, I was only 1.5 miles away, and I could go work from 9 to 1 o'clock. Or I brought enough home to manage that. But from 6 to 8, 8:30, it was sacred time for the family. And that, I think, is why, and Steve will attest, through all of it, we're good still, right? And that's an important part. We don't want you to lose your spouses and your family from becoming successful and wealthy. And that's my concluding life tip balance. Hope it was good. Okay, thank you. There's my email. Thank you, everybody.